Can we just pray? Father, we gather here this morning to study your word, to be equipped by it, and to have a deeper understanding of your calling for each one of us in this world. Just heard the world around us is a troubled place. And Father, you are the answer to those troubles. And we just pray that as we study your word together, that we might actually hear you speaking into us and re-equipping us for the mission that you've called us to in the world around us. Amen. Thank you. It's nice to be with you again. Penny has already explained the parable. Look at this. I was just reflecting when I saw this was the allocated topic for today. I thought, how many times have we heard that story? You know, I'm sure most of us heard it at least once a year. Is that right? Yeah, I heard it in Sunday school. I heard it in Bible class when I was growing up. I heard it from the age of 12, at least once a year, as I attended church. I studied it as training for a Baptist lay preacher. I'm sure I spoke on it in Bhutan on the missionary. I spoke on it in New Zealand in deputation, and I'm sure I've done several others. And yet I thought, well, is there something more? I'm sure we've all heard very erudite people, much more erudite than me, speak on this, and we know the meaning. Or do we? I thought the reading that was read, the one allocated, is the usual one. We have the story, and we have the explanation. But there's some missing words. And I think the words are missing are the ones I've come to talk to you about. It's rather like Paul in Athens, where it says, I went around your marketplace and all these hundreds of statues to gods. He said, and I found one to the unknown God. I've come to talk about him. I'd like us to look really at the words in between, the sort of words that are usually regarded as a footnote to the story. And in those, Jesus says, this fulfills the prophecy of Isaiah. I spoke on Isaiah last time, and I noticed next month my topic is another reading from Isaiah, so I've got Isaiah 3 times. So maybe we should look at Isaiah and his message for the church today. But he said, the prophecy of Isaiah, they hear but don't understand, they look but don't see, for their hearts are fat and heavy, and their ears are dull, as they have closed their eyes in sleep, so they won't see and hear and understand and turn to God again, and let me heal them. Let me heal them. Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Many a prophet and godly man has longed to see what you have seen and hear what you have heard, but they couldn't. And now, in the context of Isaiah, these words were spoken to people for whom religion had taken the place of faith and trust in a living God. They were so burdened by religion in the time of Christ that they couldn't understand what Jesus spoke of in the Beatitudes. It puzzled them. Even though they had seen healing, they didn't see that these represented the desire of a compassionate God to bring health and wholeness to all people. They couldn't comprehend the significance of Jesus. And the question is, have we done that to people? Have we, as Christians, as churches, have we actually dulled people's ears and eyes to what Jesus is really about, which is the healing of the nations? We pray, may your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Do we exist for that to happen? Does mission mean trying to get a few more people to sit on pews? What does it mean to recruit active soldiers, if you like, for the battle against evil, as Paul said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and principalities and the spiritual forces of wickedness in high places. So this parable of the sower is actually a lot more than what we typically say about doing mission, preach the gospel, some hear, some don't. It's about whether people respond to recruitment back into the rightful army that they belong to. God's battalions to do battle with the evil that so corrupts the world that God has made. The evil that condemns 30,000 children, as I said last time, 30,000 children to die each day due to poverty, needlessly to die, whilst we exist in luxury. It's a world that needs redeeming, a world that needs healing. And that's what Jesus said. He has come to heal the world, and we are his agents in doing that. And the problem is that over the centuries, religion has become a thing of coming into church and doing things, having absolution and going off and coming back next week. This church is not like that. This congregation here is a powerhouse for that active drive to heal this community. With CAP, street pastors, the schools workers, you name it. Loaf Project exists from here, basically, to bring massive healing to parts of the world through Christian agencies. We exist for that purpose, and we must not forget that. But Pope Francis, whom I have a great deal of respect, he says the church should be likened to a field hospital on the edge of a battlefield. Do we see it that way? A place we come to once a week to be restored, to be healed, to exchange stories with each other of the wounds we've received, where people have rejected the people we've seen. We thought, wow, they're really getting the message of God, they're giving their life over to him, and then the birds come and they go off and say, oh no, I've tried it. Is that right? We need to be healed from those wounds, from family members who just can't seem to get it. We need each other's strength for that. But we need each other's encouragement. And I've been so encouraged by stories from street pastors of miraculous events where the prayer partners have sensed something and the street pastors have gone and they've found, wow, too much people who need help. A woman walking out into an empty sea. A woman sitting in a pub saying, I'm at the end of my tether, I was just hoping somebody would come. We hear from Nick people who, through CAP, have not only managed to conquer debt, one of the products of a consumerist society, an evil where people just want to make money even though it puts other people into poverty. We see that, and we hear stories of that, and through that they have actually met Jesus. We hear these stories from this congregation. That's what we are. We are a serving congregation. Our eyes should not be closed, our ears should not be opened. But how do we actually get this message across to the world? And first of all, I think the real thing that struck me is where it says in that thing, they hear but they don't understand, they look but don't see, and they don't understand with their hearts and turn to God again. The only way that people will see God, this God who loves and wishes to heal, is if they see it in us. Is that right? How can they see unless they see? How can they hear unless we tell them? But not, I live so much of my life in mission, and it's here to making people Christians. Mission is far, far bigger than that. It's making people into agents for the redeeming purposes of God in this world. So is it enough just to pick up the pieces? This is the question. Do they see enough of us? I mean, one of the aims of Grapevine magazine is to bring a message to people. This is what God is doing through his people to heal the world. Do we actually take that to people and show them? How can they see unless they're shown? How can they see unless they see it in us? How can they hear unless they're hearing what God is doing in his love and care and compassion for humanity? I came to the conclusion looking at this parable. So often, particularly when I was training as a Baptist lay preacher, the seeds are your preaching, it's your telling people about Jesus. I think if God's redemptive purpose is healing of a suffering, painful world, a world that's suffering so much because it has gone away from him. It's like a wayward child running into the road, and you can say, don't do that. And then when it runs over, you say, well, it wasn't my fault, I said. Or do we actually scream, stop? Or even better, do we run out ourselves and put our lives in danger to save the child? And I think these are the levels that we must look at as church. So we want to say, oh no, the world would be a better place if we did this. It's a very different one to cry out from our hearts, saying, please, please, it doesn't need to be like this. It doesn't need to be like this. Is it enough to pick up the woman who's had too much to drink and has fallen on the streets and put herself in danger, put her in a safe place, get a taxi, take her home? We need to do that. And thank goodness, thank God that we have street pastors and the impact they make by showing that sort of compassion. But should we actually be looking at the culture that causes that? Should we say, God, what can we do to alter that culture? Who should we speak to? Who should we be crying out to? Mend this society. And how do we do it? It's not without cost. It will be costly. I've found by taking my courage in hands and going to people in high places, sometimes you can change things. If all of us did, we would change things. We would. And people are available. We have the Home Secretary in this constituency. We have her. She's available. Talk to her. But we need to know what God's purposes are. What does a redeemed world look like? What are we trying to get? You look and it says a child where no more shall a child die before it grows up. Where people will live to 100, it says in, where's that from? Ecclesiastes, I think. And but it's more than that. It's a society where people care for each other, where they love each other. It's not a society where our health workers and people struggle with burnout because they're not equipped with the strength of God in their heart so that they can have compassion without burning out. We have tremendous things to offer. The seed that we sow in goodness is getting alongside people. They might not be Christians. If they're doing good, then God says get alongside them. He sent his disciples out to find the men and women of Shalom, the women who desired reconciliation, who desired healing, all those properties that are involved in that word Shalom. Peace, desired all those things. And I think this is it's about kindness at a personal level. Just think of when you've received an act of kindness. I've noticed in traffic queues, it's a very simple thing, but in traffic queues, whether somebody who's trying to turn right and all the traffic's held up, I found if I let one or two people come through or come in, very often the car behind me does the same. It's very infectious. I think this parable of the sower is about infecting people. Just think of a sneeze. A sneeze can infect hundreds of people. Our sneezes as Christians. Is that right? We sneeze, but we breathe out God. We need to actually in what we do to be so filled with God's Spirit that we infect people. Instead of being drab, oh, it's boring being a Christian. It is not boring being a Christian. It's the most exciting thing. I mean, I've had a very exciting life. Poor Jane's had to put up with my exciting life. And I thank you, Jane, once again, for being a constant companion who's put up with a very unruly husband. But if I'd not been a Christian, I think I'd have had a drab life. I've had a wonderful life. And it's been tough, very tough in times. But if people don't find the Christian life exciting, even dangerous, sometimes you say, oh, why am I doing this? But God is there. God says, okay, you can only put 1% in. I'll put the other 99% in. Go out with God, and you find His strength is there. It's backing there. My current guru, if he doesn't mind being called a guru, Father Richard Rohr, American Franciscan priest, he writes, when religion is not about healing, it really does not have much to offer people in this life. Many have called such disembodied theology carrot on the stick theology, or as my friend Brian McLaren, some of you have heard Brian McLaren say, we make the gospel largely into an evacuation plan for heaven. Is that right? Is that what Jesus came? Yeah, heaven's there. Wow. It's there. But we're put here to bring that heaven to earth. Your kingdom come. Great vision at the back of Revelation. I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For that which was, all the suffering, all the misery was passed away. And God ruled day and night. If we don't understand the need and desire for healing now, then salvation, the very word salvation comes from the Latin salus, for healing, becomes a matter of hoping for some form of delayed gratification. We desperately need healing for groups, institutions, marriage, the wounds of war, abuse, race relations, and the endless social problems in which we are drowning today. But we won't know how to heal if we never learn the skills at ground zero. That's in us. The individual human heart. We need God to equip us, to make us into people who can sow the goodness. A single act of kindness. I mean, there was an article in the Royal Society of Medicine magazine in 2006, I think. Might have been 8. I can't in my mind see the difference between 6s and 8s these days. That said, it was about a random acts of kindness. And it said, you know, just bringing this into our everyday life, which is what the gospel is about. After all, God said, God in Acts it says, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. Out there is where we are the servants. That's where God is. He's there waiting to be found and waiting to give us the strength to do what He wants us. We need church. We need church. But it's a place for fellowship, for inspiration, for equipping ourselves to go out there with God and do battle. We need to bring a better world. But it will come when we develop that relationship with God. We need vision. We need vision. There's a saying which I saw somewhere. It said, found on an inscription on a church wall in Sussex, circa 1730. Well, I've searched the internet and it's quoted a lot and it's always ascribed to that, but nobody's actually found the church. But whatever it is, maybe if it was there, it was referred to in 1860 in that guy, so maybe the church has gone down or been demolished, I don't know. But it says, a vision without a task is but a dream. A task without a vision is drudgery. Does that make sense? A vision without a task is a dream. Oh, I'd love to see the world better. I'd love to see it good. Well, doing a task without a vision is drudgery. And that's the thing that affects so many people in the health service today. And that's why I mentioned health service, because that's something I'm dealing with. But a vision and a task, That is the hope of the world, and the thing that gives our lives that meaning. So our eyes see. Matthew said to the disciples, John, we had this the other week, John the Baptist's disciples, he quoted again from Isaiah. He said, go and tell John, the blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Or from the Message it says, the blind see, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the wretched of the earth learn that God is on their side. And they can only know that. Think of some of the great Christians. Think of Wilberforce, spending his whole life battling against the church very often to get the slave trade abolished. Strong, strong Christian, founded on Jesus. Elizabeth Fry, great Quaker, battling to reform the prisons and making a huge difference. Reverend Martin Luther King, who actually gave his life fighting to desegregate America. We name many of them, who actually stood for God, challenged the world, took it on, and made it a better place for God. And through God, they achieved their aims. But I love that thing, the wretched of the earth learn that God is on their side. Because that reminded me of that, it's my favourite song of all time, I think, from Les Miserables, the actual repris right at the end. It says, do you hear the people sing, lost in the valley of the night? It is the sound of a people who are climbing to the light. That's what we should be. For the wretched of the earth, there's a flame that never dies. Even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise. For the wretched of the earth, to hear the good news. For those in pain, suffering, misery, those who seeing their children die, those victims of war. I won't go into the causes of war today, but it's a sad, sad story. For all those, the story is that Christ has appointed us as the people to bring that light that will be there, to lead them to the light, that we might actually experience the joy of walking with Jesus, so that people might walk in strength, that the deaf will hear the right messages, that people's eyes will be open to the glory of serving God and being part of God's family. So let's sow those seeds of goodness. Seeds of goodness. The message in the Royal Society of Medicine, it said, you know, if a doctor who's got a patient who's just got bad news, so I've got to tell my brother, you say, well, do you want to do that or do you want me to do it? Whichever way it goes, he knows the doctor cares. Community nurse who's got to see somebody to bind up her ulcers or something, who goes in there, and this is the example he quoted, and when she gets there, she said, I'll put a kettle on for you, and before she finishes the treatment, she makes a cup of tea and leaves it for her. And just think of the effect that has. You think, I could do that. Just simple acts of encouragement. You know, just saying thank you. When you see a shop assistant who's having a bad day, say, I do admire the way you put up with people like you do. It doesn't cost anything. And yes, it's bringing words of encouragement to people in real life. Sow those grains of goodness. So, and some of them will be rejected. Some will be snatched away. But those lives that you touch with the grains of goodness will bring forth many, many more. And the vision of the spreading harvest could be ours. Thank you.